Okay, well, thank you for having me, and I'm excited here to talk to you about video games. Video games, that's awesome. I love talking about video games, and I also love talking about Christianity. And when I look at these two things, I see two homes. I see two places where I'm very comfortable. I see two places that I go to for refuge. I see two places that I love. And I hope that maybe you can love those things too. So who is this guy? This is not an exact picture of my video game collection, but it's pretty darn close. And I pulled this off the internet. I own over 1,000 games, and at $50 a pop, you can calculate that pretty easily as to how much I'm invested into video games. Have been for my whole life. It's not just about playing video games and having fun for me. I love it as an art form. I love it. The way some people love anime, the way some people love photography, the way some people love impressionists. I love video games. And so what that means is I'll pretty much play anything at least once. And when this game came up on Steam, Euro Truck Simulator 2, because the first one was so popular, I was like, I gotta play this. And so I got to be, in this video game, a trucker in Europe, driving concrete and goods and steel frames from Brussels to Amsterdam and picking jobs and buying my Volvo truck and everything. It was awesome. So driving down those roads in Europe, sometimes in England on the wrong side, and listening to country music and living the life of what it's like to be a European trucker. That was a fun game. I don't play it anymore. I've opened a hobby store, and this is my hobby store in Burlington. It's called The Hobby Kingdom, and we sell card games like Magic. We sell miniature games like Warhammer, Warhammer 40K, Lord of the Rings back in the day. And we sell lots of board games. You can't see that from that picture. And role-playing games and just lots of different kinds of games. So it's not just about video games for me. It's like all forms of gaming. We'll be focused more on video games today, but drawing from all these things. I do play Dungeons & Dragons. Who here has played Dungeons & Dragons? Who's here willing to admit to playing Dungeons & Dragons? Hey, we got two. Yeah. How do your parents feel about that? Eh? How do you think the church feels about that? Not sure. Well, they didn't admit to it right away. Dungeons & Dragons is incredible, and the very first guy that I hired that worked at the Hobby Kingdom was a youth pastor, and that youth pastor ran a Dungeons & Dragons game for kids in the neighborhood, and they would come in and they played through the book of Revelation. And through that, they went to Snowflake, and several of them became Christians. So it is possible to use Dungeons & Dragons in order to bring people to Christ. That'll blow your mind. It's not just about playing for me. 2 years ago, I started another company. I own several. Mirthworks is educational gaming. And we make iPad and Android games. And Catch the Monkey was our first title. And this is a non-violent action game that we released. And we won some awards and that kind of stuff. So I make games full-time as a living. And our next title is Curious Castle, which is a spelling game. And you're like, wow, that's really not very exciting. So I have another company, which is Defiance Game Studio, and this is gamer games. So for you Xbox, PS4 type people, this is the next game that I'm working on. It's called Archmage. And this game was inspired by, I don't know if any of you read Dragonlance, and I was reading along in Dragonlance, and it just really inspired me. And so I guess like an artist would maybe read something, read some poetry, something like that, and they would go and paint a picture. I read something, I go and I make a game. That's my expression form. And so Archmage is loosely based on what was happening in this novel, but what really struck me was, what are you willing to do to be the best in the world at something? What are you willing to do? And that's kind of what this novel explores. And so I want to make a game that has that. What are you willing to do? And kind of the twisting of the soul. We were just talking about Breaking Bad. Breaking Bad is about, what are you willing to do to take care of your family? And at first, Walt is only willing to do so much, but then Walt will do anything. And it's a slippery slope, and that's what I want to try to put into this video game. So when we get started here, I want to talk first about the power of video games before we go into what the church has to do or not do around video games. So hopefully, I can teach you a few things. So what is a game? the International Game Developers Association, which has 10,000 members of game developers throughout the world, wanted to answer that question, what is a game? And they had a really hard time amongst all these professionals in this association answering what is a game. And so this is kind of the accepted definition of what is a game. So first thing is games are an activity. Games have rules. Games have conflict. Games have goals for the player to achieve. Games involve decision making. You're not just watching like a movie. Games are artificial. It doesn't matter what happens in the game in the sense of life, right? Like whether you win or lose, it doesn't matter. That's what makes it a game, okay? If you're doing surgery on someone, you could be having fun, you could have goals, but what happens actually matters, right? That's no longer a game, okay? Games are voluntary. It's not fun if you have to play it. Anybody gone through that? And games have an uncertain outcome. Now that one's actually really interesting, and we'll get to that later. But that's an important one. Games have an uncertain outcome. Okay, so what goes into making a movie? If you were going to make a movie, what kind of stuff goes into making a movie? And I'm not talking about coffee and grips and all other stuff, but just at a very high level, what kind of stuff or components goes into making a movie? Just shout it out and I'll reveal them as you...
Plot.
Pardon?
Plot.
Plot, yeah, we got to have a script, right? Okay, what else goes into a movie? Actors, yes. What else goes into a movie?
Director.
Yeah, that's part of the actors, directors, whatever, yeah. Come on, what else does a movie have? You can't release a Hollywood movie now without this.
Explosions.
Special effects, that's right. Some kind of visual effects, some kind of artistry, right? Like art, effects, whatever, right? And finally, what else goes into a movie?
Drama.
Yeah, that's part of the script, yeah. There's one more component. Yeah, that's right, music and sound, there you go. We have talkies now. Okay, yeah, so that's what goes into a film, okay? At a high level, right? Doesn't cover everything, but generally those are the components that goes into it. Okay, let's say you're going to make a game. What goes into a game? A script, very good. What else goes into a game?
Stuff blown up.
Well, we're not going to get to that yet. Yeah, not in Catch the Monkey. That's right. Music, visual effects, and art. Actors, we have voice actors, we have the things reading to you, or maybe there's motion capture, whatever. But what else do you have in a game?
Control.
That's right, controls. Right? You have some form of control, some kind of input that goes into the game. And if those are sluggish, or those don't respond well, it ruins the whole experience, right? If you're Mario and you don't press the B button and he just falls into the chasm anyway, that really sucks, right? It has to be responsive. Okay, what else goes into a game? Yeah, what goes into a game?
What goes into a game?
Yeah.
What do we go over?
Pardon?
What have we gone over?
Well, we have a plot and music and visual effects and actors and controls.
The villain?
That's part of the plot, yeah.
Help Jesus out.
Okay, what else goes into a game? There's more than this. Anybody? Oh, it's going to be a long class. Game mechanics. We have mechanics that go into the game, whether that's leveling up, collecting coins, scoring, level, like whatever. There's like stuff, right? Bullets in your gun, like that you have to reload. Like those are all mechanics. Okay, those don't exist in a movie, right? Why? Because you have no control. Well, if you have no control, then you don't need all these mechanics. So that's the mechanics. And then the final thing is the most important thing in a video game or any kind of game. You have to have the last thing. What do you think the last thing is? Yeah, you have to play. That's part of the controller. But part of the plot. You won't play it if it doesn't have it. You can have a game without a system. You can go into the snow and invent a game. fun. The game has to have fun. And as a game designer, I will tell you that is the most difficult part. I can program controllers, I can program graphics, I can program sound, all this stuff. But finding the fun, that's what we call it in game design, finding the fun is very difficult, very difficult. So we'll be in a boardroom, we'll use a whiteboard, we'll come up with ideas, we'll program them, we'll put them in, we'll put controls to them, we'll try them out, and they suck. And you have to cut it, and you have to start over, because you have to find the fun. And so, as you can see, making a game is much more difficult than making a film, writing a book, any of those kinds of things. Okay? Now I want to talk about the intensity of games. This is an internet cafe in Taiwan. Okay? And at 10 p.m. on a Tuesday night, a 23-year-old man went in after work, and he paid for 23 hours of play. He signed into his World of Warcraft account, and 10 hours later, he was dead. He died from organ failure due to lack of sleep. Okay? This is not an isolated incident. This happens regularly. Okay? It's happening every month, that people are dying because they are playing a game. My point here is not like games are evil or anything. My point here is there's something going on with a game to have that level of intensity. You cannot watch TV until you die. You will turn it off. You will fall asleep. Okay? You can't play cards with friends until you die. Even driving. People fall asleep driving. So there's something about driving that's not nearly as intense or interactive or engaging as a video game is, right? So we're talking about something very potent. Video games are very potent, powerful forms of art. Okay? Don't look up the word pleasure in Google Images. You won't get this picture. So yeah, really. So why? Why do we play video games? What are these video games giving that people aren't getting in other ways? I've done a lot of study over the last 2 years, spent a lot of my time reading psychology and game design and people who are investigating what fun really is and what that means. And so the best way to describe it is with an Italian word called fiero. And you'll know that maybe you'll know that there's a car named a fiero as well. And that word is for when you're trying to do something that's really, really hard, like say studying for an exam, and you ace it. You're like, yes! That kind of a feeling, that moment, fiero, that's what that is. That's called fiero. Okay? We don't have a good English word for it. So that's a fiero moment. Video games provide fiero. That's what they do. So you're playing, whether it's Mario trying to jump or it's Call of Duty trying to line up the sniper shot and nail the guy as he's running across the beach or something, provides that moment of incredible accomplishment, that rush of exuberance, right, when you accomplish something. And so what's amazing about video games is that, who here has a job, like, working a part-time job, something like that? Yeah? Okay. And so what's your job? Guy in blue. Line cook. Okay, so you're a line cook, and you have all these orders coming in. Maybe they're coming fast and furious, dinner time, something like that, right? And you make it through all of that. Do you feel good? Do you feel? Yeah, you're like, yeah, this feels great, right? It was hard, like maybe I was going to get buried under it and whatever, and then you made it through, and you have this feeling of accomplishment, right? Video games provide that feeling of accomplishment shorter, faster, more potently than anything else in life. And that's why people love playing video games, and that's why it's such a powerful art form. Okay? That is what video games sell, almost in the drug sense. They sell feelings of accomplishment. Very important when we get to other stuff. Okay? Now I want to talk about knowledge. English is a really terrible language, but it's the only one I know, so it's the only one I'm going to use. We have a word love. What does it mean? Lots of stuff. I love cars, I love my wife, I love video games. It means all kinds of things. It's a terrible word, okay? Same thing with the word knowledge in English. It's not precise enough. In Hebrew, they have 2 words for the word knowledge, okay? The first form is the observational, studied, saw someone do it kind of knowledge, okay? The second form of knowledge is the experiential, okay? And so your name is Jesus?
Yes.
That's pretty cool. Hi, Jesus. I'm Thomas. Nice to meet you. Okay, so I'm going to punch Jesus in the face, and you're all going to watch, okay? And you will all have the observational form of knowledge of what it's like to be punched in the face. But Jesus, he has a special form of knowledge, which is to be punched in the face, okay? Yeah, that's a privilege, okay? So I'm not actually going to do it. But do you get my point, how there's two forms of knowledge? Video games provide that second form of knowledge, that experiential form of knowledge. Anybody play Assassin's Creed 2? Yeah? And where does that take place? Where in Italy?
Well, Florence and Vienna.
Yeah, Florence. I was in Florence, and I was going around with my wife and looking around at everything, and I was just like, wow, this is neat. This is pretty cool. And I went up Bell Tower and took some pictures of stuff, and that was pretty interesting. I went home, and my friend lent me Assassin's Creed 2, and I started playing it. I started climbing the cathedrals I had been in. I climbed up the bell tower that I had been in. I went to St. John's Baptistry, and I saw the golden doors. I got more out of Florence playing Assassin's Creed 2 than I did traveling in Florence myself. Now, maybe that's sick, but my point here is when I was in Florence, I would look up at the ceiling and go, wow, that's neat. In Assassin's Creed, I could climb the banisters and actually hang off of the ceiling, and I would notice things. I would notice little details that I didn't notice from actually being there. Video games provide an experiential form of knowledge. That's another reason why they're so powerful. Okay, you're all under 40, so I probably don't need to convince you that video games are kind of a popular big thing. 97% of teenagers have played a video game of some form. Anybody here never played a video game? Okay. 75% of college students, 50% of adults. The average gamer, what do you think the age is of the average gamer? 20? 14? Sounds about right? 34. 34. Because my generation, I was born in '76, my generation grew up with Nintendo, and then Super Nintendo, and then PlayStation, and then PlayStation 2, and now PlayStation 3, and PlayStation 4. And I have a PlayStation 4 in my house, and pretty much everything else. That gets to one of the reasons why most people you will encounter in the church think of video games as for children. Why? Because when video games first came on the scene, they were not advertised to the 40-year-olds. They were advertised to the 8-year-olds, me, and I've grown with it. Now here's the thing. People my age are now the pastors, elders, chair of the board, all that stuff within the church. But we still have this concept that they're for the kids. Okay, so 34. Most frequent purchaser, 39 years old. Average years playing, 12 years. 8 hours a week spent playing. I think that's just the beginning of qualifying you as a gamer. 40% of all gamers are female now. In the past, it was about 10-15%. There's been some real changes in game design in order to open that up. And the average game now takes between 10 and 12 hours to complete, unless it's Skyrim. But in the past, when you paid your $50 or $60, the idea was they were selling you 40 hours of entertainment. Okay? And now it's down to 10. Why? So they can sell you more games. Because you're 34 years old. Okay? I'm just over that. I'm 37 right now. And I have a 2-year-old, and I have a wife, and I have a couple of jobs. I don't have 40 hours to play a game in order to get that feeling of accomplishment, but I might have 10. And so games are now designed not for the 14-year-old that has unlimited time. They can play Minecraft. But for me, we need games that are 10 hours long. That's very important. Okay, now I want to tell you something that you probably haven't thought of, is about the ability for video game to change people's minds about something that's important. And so there is a professor in Michigan State University, 2 professors actually, in 2010, created a game about peace in the Middle East, specifically the Palestinian problem in Israel. And so they called it Peacemaker, and there's a screenshot of it. And they had the game, and they had a bunch of college students that are willing to, I don't know, do things, and they tried it out on a bunch of them. And here's what they found. Before the game, they had preconceived ideas about what the Palestinian and Israeli issue was going on, right? So you see the attitude originally quite divergent. After playing the game, they had a lot more understanding for the other side, okay? This is the first step towards some kind of a peace process. This is really interesting that people have changed their opinion about something very serious, geopolitical issue that's been going on for decades. This game helped change minds. I think that's really important. And finally, video games as an art form. The Smithsonian 2012 had an exhibit, and still does, on video games, specifically on video games, the Smithsonian. Video games are now qualified as art, and that means in the States, they have the National Endowment of the Arts. You can get up to $200,000 towards the creation of any video game. The same as you would for a painting, putting on a theater production, ballet, any of these other kind of things, making a movie, that kind of stuff. Okay? Video games are now an art form. And the last thing I want to tell you about video games is video games have been a sanctuary for many people, including myself. And I was 10 years old when my parents divorced, and my whole life changed. If any of you have gone through that, it's a ripping and a tearing apart of something that God had united, and my whole world was upside down. And so for me, when I was 10 years old, and I would go to class, grade 5, and they're like, hey, did you read your Ramona book? And I'm like, no, because I don't care. Because there's more important things in life than whether I read Ramona Goes to Breakfast or something like that. And so in a time of great turmoil, when my world was totally flipped upside down, and now I have to start going weekends to my dad's, and none of my friends are around there, and I don't know anybody, and this isn't my bedroom, and all those issues, video games provided stability. The world in video games had rules, and it never changed, and it was always there. And through, seriously, some counseling, I was able to find that God gave me video games in order to help me through a really difficult time in my life. Now think about that for the general youth out there that are playing video games, even for the young adults. Video games are a sanctuary. They're providing something to people and helping them in life. I want to give you a brief history of video games. This was a mock-up of the Xbox 720 controller. We are currently in the 8th generation of video game systems. The 7th generation was the PS3, Xbox 360. Okay, so very briefly, processing power of CPU chips has grown dramatically since 71 to 2011. So over a period of 40 years, you've gone from, at the bottom, 2,300 transistors to 2.6 million transistors, okay, in 40 years. And so processing power has improved 1.1 million times over in 40-year period. Okay? The next thing is storage. That's I had that, the Atari 2600. It has 0.003 megabytes of space on it. Then you have Nintendo, which has 1 megabyte of space. Then you have PlayStation, which had 700. And then the previous generation, we had 50 gigs of space, or 50,000 megabytes of space. Okay, again, over, well, this is a 30-year period, right? That's a pretty big change. So you're like, yeah, that's really great. What does that really mean? Well, this is 3D rendering in 1992. I'm about to show you 4 games that come from the same company. When I say the same company, what's important here is to think 4 paintings from the same artist, or 4 films from the same director, okay? It's the same person trying to make the same art, but their means of creating that art have changed. So this is the very first one, Wolfenstein. And you can see, you know, it's a Nazi. You can see there's a guy, he's a soldier. I can tell he has a gun, he's trying to shoot at me. Okay. This is Quake. And now you see shadowing, and you see, you know, their arms are separate. It's a real 3D environment. I know it's a little dark, but the whole game is dark. Then we go to Quake 3, and that tongue looks disgusting and real. And it's because of this new curved surfaces that they're able to do. And you look at the guy, you can tell, you know, where his head is, where his arms are, his kind of his muscles. You can see he has a gun. You can see that he has a cigar coming out. Again, a lot more detail in that. And then we go into Doom 3. and now you have incredible levels of lighting, the muscles on the leg and the arms and stuff. So this is what I'm talking about. Things have changed incredibly over the last 30 and 40 years. Another big moment of change was this company. In 1998, it was a brand new company, two executives from Microsoft, both left Microsoft with $1 million kind of goodbye package. They took their $1 million, they combined them to make $2 million. See what I did there? That's math. They had $2 million, put that together, they created a company called Valve. And they didn't know what they were going to do, but they knew kind of 3D games were going to be kind of interesting in the future and stuff. And so they designed a 3D shooting game with a story. And that blew everybody's mind. They're like, what are you talking about with a story? Okay, if we go back to this, they're like, what kind of story is there? Just shoot everything, right? And that was being very popular. They said, no, we're going to make one with a story. And they bet the whole company on that idea. They were going to live or fail based on that. And the result is that they won 50 Game of the Year awards, and they changed the industry. So now you have 3D shooting or action and story. And that wasn't married up before this particular game, Half-Life. Okay? So what does it all mean? What am I talking about this for? Over the years, this is the worst graph you're ever going to see because you see there's no actual second axis. There's just a timeline. So not very scientific. But my point here is that our capabilities for what we're able to make in a video game have gone up dramatically. But the depth of those games has not gone up dramatically. Okay? The art form, the ability to express ideas in the art form has not kept pace with the technology. So you get into kind of a Jurassic Park mentality. Is like we were so caught up with could, we never asked if we should, right? This is what's happening in video games, okay? So some industry averages, just to let you know, give you a framework. The average AAA title, okay, AAA means like kind of the big blockbuster, invest all the money in it kind of game. AAA title, the budget's $23 million. What does that remind you of? $23 million budget sounds like a movie. That's right. Sounds like a film. You can make a romantic comedy for $20 million. You can't make any of the action films. Those are closer to 100 or maybe even 200. But you can make a lot of movies for $20 million. Napoleon Dynamite, for instance, was made for like $5 million. There's a lot of independent films that have gone big that made for less than that. Okay, average team size, 120 people working on it, 2 years. And the average game sells 2.5 million units. Okay, so the 2.5 million units at $50, you're at about 100 million, but the stores get about half of that, and then the publishers get about half of that, so you end up, they kind of make $40 million or whatever off of their $23 million budget. Okay, so that's kind of generally how the AAA titles work. Okay, the highest cost video game was Final Fantasy VII for the PlayStation in 1997, cost $150 million. Okay, that's obviously 7 times over what everybody else was spending. That's a big deal. $45 million production budget, $100 million marketing budget. Okay? Pardon? So that was the number one game. This is now the number one game. It cost, anybody know what it cost? No? $250 million. This game cost more than in the film Avatar, or name any of your kind of favorite action movies or whatever. This game cost more than that. This game, they put 5 times more budget into this game than they do in Halo or any of these other kind of games that are out there. So that's a pretty big deal, right? They spent a lot of money making this game. How did they do? $800 million in 24 hours. Okay? $1 billion in 3 days. It is the fastest selling piece of entertainment in history. Okay? This is the king of the hill for entertainment. It sold 32.5 million units, so far. Just to give you an idea, Tetris on the Game Boy sold 35 million. Mario Kart Wii. So this is number 5 of all time in terms of units sold. Mario Kart for the Wii. Minecraft is 36 million. Super Mario Brothers for the NES, like the original Super Mario, is 40 million. And Wii Sports is still number 1 at 82 million because it's packed in with the system. it's kind of cheating. So really Minecraft is number one, really. Okay? So do you believe me now that video games are a big deal? Yes?
Yes.
Because I could repeat all this.
No, no.
Okay, now let's talk about games in the church, okay? The pulpit of America is a term that has been thrown around for a long time, like probably 100 years. What it means is, where do you go to get your ideas? Where do you go to get interpretation of life? Where do you go in order to understand life, relationship, those kinds of things? Okay? Andrew Fletcher wrote in 1703, "Let me write the songs of a nation. I do not care who writes its laws." It's very interesting. The art is more important than the laws of the land. In a film, it's a documentary with Keanu Reeves, who's talking about digital film versus film, like 35 millimeter film, and the transition that's happening in Hollywood over that. In there, I think it's Martin Scorsese that says, movies are the pulpit of America. And I can tell you from having a 19-year-old niece, her ideas of what her relationship should be with her boyfriend comes from the OC and movies. It just does. When I see her making mistakes with her boyfriend, she's reenacting what she saw in the movies, because that's her frame of reference. That's what's telling her this is generally how people do things, right? She doesn't care about what I say about what Scripture and God has to do with relationships. She doesn't care about that. It's coming from the movies, okay? What I'm telling you is that video games are the new pulpit of America, okay? This is where we're going to get our normative ideas. And you're like, that's kind of crazy and stuff. Yeah, well, wait a decade. Wait a decade. When you guys are out in the field dealing with youth and church issues, you're going to see what I'm telling you. So what has the church's response been to video games? I think you can boil it down into 4. Okay? The first is condemnation. That's the first. We get right out there right away. Okay? Whether it's rock and roll, whether it's movies, now it's video games. We get right up front with condemnation. The second is apathy. Does it really matter? Who cares? Whatever. That's the world. Let them do their thing. The third is blind embrace. And the fourth is very rare, and that's opportunity. Okay? So now I'm going to talk through what those 4 things are. The first is condemnation. I like that picture. Magic Gathering is the number 1 card game of all time, and it still sells like hotcakes. And they have an electronic version of it as well, in case you want the actual cards. So I sell Magic. I've played Magic, and I sell Magic in my store. And I'm an elder in my church, and we have a 3-year term. My term is now up, but I was into my 2nd year of being an elder, and one of the people in my church was in my hobby store, and they said, he's selling Magic. Magic is forbidden by the Bible. So this guy's living in sin. So he talked to me about this. And I said, okay. And he's like, why would you play at that which is forbidden? Okay? If I said I had a new card game called Adultery, and we're going to play Adultery, the card game, is that a good thing to be playing? Right? Think about that for a second. It's like, why would I want to play Fornicator, the card game? Right? This is where he's coming from. He's like, yeah, God says you can't use magic, so why would you play a pretend magic? Okay? So he and I talked, and I sat in his living room, and he went through his scriptures, and he told me everything that he thought about this. And my very first question was, is this a dialogue? Or you just want to tell me your position? And then he was like, oh, okay, I guess I'll give you a chance to say your side. But really, I could tell that wasn't on his mind. He was so focused on, I need to tell you what I think, that he wasn't in a listening mode. And so I said, okay, well, as an owner of this store, I've owned the Hobby Kingdom now for 7 years, and as a game designer, I've thought a lot about what a Christian can and shouldn't do. Right? This is very important to me. This is not a theoretical issue. This is my livelihood that is on the line here. And so he made it very clear that in order for me to be an elder, to be his spiritual teacher and responsible for him and that kind of stuff, I had to basically recant on this magic stuff and either sell my store and have nothing to do with it, or keep the store and no longer have the magic stuff. Magic's about 30% of our revenue. So it's 30% of my revenue. I wouldn't be able to pay employees if I stopped carrying this magic stuff. Now I want to stress, that's not my reason for making a decision, okay? My leading is the Holy Spirit, not my wallet. And so I took everything that he said in his living room, and I went home and I prayed about that. And I said, Lord, are you leading me? Because I am so astray. You're using this guy in order to bring me back, right? I prayed that. I talked with my wife. I talked to the people at the store who are believers, and we really wrestled with this and dealt with this issue. I went back to him and said, dude, I'm feeling no conviction about this whatsoever. Like nothing. Like I have prayed everything I can pray, and I'm not getting anything here. And he's like, okay, well, we have to take this up to the leadership team. So this is, for him, a matter of living in sin, right? It's the same as having an adulterous affair. And I'm like, no, I'm not giving up my girlfriend, right? So he's like, okay. So we took it to the elders. So now the elders are faced with, what do we do? What do we do? Do we stop Thomas from being an elder? Because if we do stop him from being elder, we do say that, yes, he's living in sin. We have to kick him out of the church. So now it's excommunication, right? You have to be consistent on this. Or we say, no, it's okay what he's doing, and then this guy and his wife are going to leave the church, and his wife leads our children's ministry, and we would have nobody to run children's ministry. Okay? So, if you want to talk about gaming, whatever, this is a real issue that was about to split our church. Because there were people around me, someone that I had led to Christ, that was like, Thomas, I'm going with you anywhere you go. So now I got people who are jumping on the Thomas camp about this, right? Satan will use anything. And in this particular case, he was using gaming. Okay, so the elders, you all have parents, I assume. What do your parents know about Magic the Gathering? Nothing. And that's what you can expect for the people that were also on the elders team. I was the youngest person on the elders team. And so this guy said, okay, well, let me show you what I'm so concerned about. Here are some black magic cards from the game. Okay, so we got Mind Extraction and Mind Rot and Wrench Mind and Demonic Appetite. So he's like, this is what Thomas is selling to kids. Yeah, you know, I kind of rest my case, right? So the elders, they looked at this and they're like, holy cow, Thomas, what are you doing? And that's when I said, evil is evil. Evil is evil. And black in Magic represents the forces of evil. There's other cards. It's not just these. There's white cards, which have righteousness and truth and angels and all these things. And then there's red and green and blue, which are in between. This is not all there is to Magic. And let me ask you a question. Which is worse, to downplay evil or to represent evil accurately? Anybody? I'm just curious. What do you guys think about that? This is the said interactive time that I promised, John.
What do you want us to say? I'm afraid to.
Yeah. Okay, well, we'll skip past the interactive portion. C.S. Lewis.
This is the world these guys are in, so I actually want us to have discussion on this.
Yeah, I'm curious what you guys think.
Downplay it.
You think it's better to sanitize evil?
No, I mean, that's worse to downplay it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Anybody else on the other camp?
I think in a healthy environment, if you represent it well, then yes. But you can't just represent it all. Like, there's just times when it's not appropriate to be
Sure.
bringing these 4 cards out. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, you're not going to go to preschool and say, hey, let's play with the black magic cards and that kind of thing. Okay. This issue is not new to Magic. This issue was originally brought up with the Sistine Chapel. And when Michelangelo painted the Final Judgment on the back of the Sistine Chapel, there's a part of hell that's there, and people in torment. And the criticism was, you can't show that, especially in church. right? These people are like in torment. It's terrible, right? And he painted evil evilly. That's the word that I use for it. I told you English was a rotten language. He painted evil evilly. And people really got upset about that, and they covered it up for a while. And so here we are again, representing evil evilly. And C.S. Lewis says, I would much rather have, or the sin is representing sin as less than it is. Right? And of course I agree with that, and that's why I shared it with you. If I was in the other camp, then I'd have probably a different quote. But I was really convinced by that. And so that's what I shared with the eldership. And this is a very important issue when it comes to people talking about Grand Theft Auto or those kinds of things, right? My situation was around Magic the Gathering. There will be other elders or other youth pastors that are called into question over their entertainment choices. And you have to deal with the question of evil. How is it represented, and what are you interacting with it? So the elders took that and thought that was very interesting, and ultimately sided with this is an area of spiritual freedom. And therefore, we are not going to rule what Thomas can or cannot do within his store. We are going to stand behind him. And this couple ended up leaving the church. And it wasn't a huge catastrophe, but it did not end well. I lost a brother and a sister over this issue. And I hope to be able to worship with them again, but they felt that they could no longer worship with me. Going back to these cards, if this is all you've seen about magic, it really skews your opinion. If this is all you've seen about video games, because that's all the media talks about, these two, are they really the same? I don't think so. So when you encounter someone who is talking about video games and giving you the line of condemnation, I think it's important to ask them, what have you seen? What have you played? Or what, if you're concerned about your child, what is your child seeing? What does your child play? Right? Because if you're just listening to the media and what Grand Theft Auto with the strippers and the killing and the murder and all the drugs and just all that stuff, yeah, okay, that's going to skew your opinion. I think it's no different than judging film based on pornography. Sure, it's there. Yes, it's using the same art form, but do you judge all film by that? Today, most people would not. 50 years ago, they would. They would say, yep, all film. Now, film has changed. Video games, I think, will change as well. So I think this is the path to take with people with condemnation. Apathy. Apathy I'm using here to mean people that are like, it doesn't matter, but in the sense of fantasy and, spending time on these kinds of things, like whether it's 10 hours a week or whatever, there's so much more you could be doing for the kingdom than playing a video game. Okay, do you see where I'm going with that? I come from a Dutch Reformed background. I'm not personally Dutch, but in that background, it's about, you work as hard as you can, you give your money to the missionaries, you help support our private schools, and playing video games doesn't factor into the life of a good Christian, right? Because you are a poor time steward if you are playing video games or reading fantasy fiction or watching a lot of movies and that kind of stuff. Okay, so you kind of understand what I'm saying here about the apathetic viewpoint. Now, the first thing I would say about that is God is an artist. And in 2 Chronicles 3:6, when it talks about Solomon creating the temple, and Solomon covered the house with precious stones for beauty. There is nothing pragmatic about those stones being on that wall. There were load-bearing walls in the temple, but you didn't have to put precious stones on them to make them more load-bearing. And this is really important because people are going to say, like, you're wasting your time, you could be doing better things with your money, you could give it to this mission, blah, blah, blah. God cares about beauty, and he cares about this kind of stuff. Has anybody had cheesecake from the Cheesecake Factory? And it is unbelievable, okay? I think it's important to ask the question, where does pleasure come from? Who does pleasure come from? Yeah. Anybody?
Cheesecake.
Yes. Pleasure comes from cheesecake, and cheesecake created God, and God created the universe.
Amen.
When that cheesecake hits your mouth, it's your taste buds that God built in, that fire the neurons that God built in to enjoy the cheesecake. Didn't have to. He didn't have to. I think that's really important, right? God's an artist, and he does things that he didn't have to for purely just for enjoyment. I think we get caught up in the church thinking that Satan somehow made pleasure. It's like, so God had this like squeaky clean, garden and everything, and then Satan came along and said, eating the fruit is going to be really pleasurable and really great, and now suddenly, due to the fall, we have pleasure. That's not the case. But people seem to act that way. So pleasure is good. Anybody read the Screw Tape Letters?
Yes.
Yeah, most people are nodding. The Screw Tape Letters is really a very important book, I think, for probably for the kind of work that you're about to go into. It's awesome to read things from the other side, right? And so for those who aren't familiar with the book, it's Screw Tape is a demon that is talking to his nephew demon, who's kind of a younger upstart demon, about how to stop people from becoming saved and how to ruin God's plans on earth. Okay, so it's written from this satirical viewpoint. And they use words like our Father below to refer to Satan, and the enemy is God or Christ and the church and that kind of thing. Okay, so there's amazing explanation within the Screw Tape Letters. C.S. Lewis was really one of the finest minds that I've ever read. So I have two quotes here for you. This is kind of mid in the book. He says, fun, this is the demon talking, he says, fun is closely related to joy, a sort of emotional froth arising from the play instinct. It is very little use to us. It can sometimes be used, of course, to divert humans from something else which the enemy, God, would like them to be feeling or doing. But in itself, it has wholly undesirable tendencies. It promotes charity, courage, contentment, and many other evils. God created pleasure. And when you experience true, real pleasure, not the false pleasure of getting high on marijuana, true pleasure, like when my 2-year-old comes up and says, Daddy, okay? I know there's a God in those kinds of moments. And those kind of moments do make me feel charitable and content and those kinds of things. Okay? Next quote. But you were trying to damn your patient by the world, that is, by palming off vanity, bustle, irony, and expensive tedium as pleasures. How can you have failed to see that a real pleasure was the last thing you ought to have let him meet? Didn't you foresee that it would just kill by contrast all the trumpery which you have been so laboriously teaching him to value? And that the sort of pleasure which the book and the walk gave him was the most dangerous of all. So what takes place here is the patient, the one the demon's assigned to make sure that he ends up in hell, goes for a walk and reads a book. And he just experiences God's beauty and nature and that kind of stuff. And so here the demon's getting really upset about that because that's real, versus going to a party and kind of vainly talking about yourself and hearing someone else vainly talk about themselves and then to leave and go, yeah, we had a good time, right? It doesn't even compare. Next is on stories and other essays, also from C.S. Lewis. The value of the myth is that it takes all the things we know and restores them to the rich significance which has been hidden by the veil of familiarity. The child enjoys his cold meat, otherwise dull to him, by pretending it is buffalo, just killed with his own bow and arrow, and the child is wise. The real meat comes back to him more savory for having been dipped in a story. By putting bread, gold, horse, apple, or the very roads into a myth, we do not retreat from reality, we rediscover reality. Remember what I told you about rediscovering Florence? I was in Florence, and I blurred past a lot of things. I went to a kind of fantasy version of Florence, and it opened my eyes to experiencing the real world in a better way. Video games have the power to do that. Okay? So I can play in a video game and see a relationship, play in a video game and have a situation happen, and it gives me better eyes to see those things in real life and to experience them anew. And finally, Tolkien, guy who wrote Lord of the Rings, kind of a popular guy, on escapism. Okay, why should a man be scorned if, finding himself in prison, he tries to get out and go home? Or if, when he cannot do so, he thinks and talks about other topics than jailers and prison walls? The world outside has not become less real because the prisoner cannot see it. In using escape in this way, the critics have chosen the wrong word, and what is more, they are confusing, not always, but by sincere error, the escape of the prisoner with the flight of the deserter. Just so a party spokesman might have labeled departure from the misery of the Führers or any other Reich, and even criticism of it as treachery. Not only do they confound the escape of the prisoner with the flight of the deserter, but they would seem to prefer the acquiescence of the Quisling to the resistance of the patriot. That guy knows how to write. The point here is, when you're dealing with someone who's like, what's all this fantasy and pretend and play, and what is all this about? That is not the same as just running away and abdicating to the world. Sometimes it is. Sometimes people are playing video games to abdicate from the world. But that is not always the case. And I think that's an important part to bring to that. Okay, the third is blind embrace of video games. Okay, this is the kind of person who's just like, hey, yeah, video games, let's play, let's just go. You know, anything that comes out, any popular thing and stuff. I would say there's a real lack of discernment going on in that. Okay, so God has some thoughts on things. In 1 Corinthians, all things are lawful, but not all things are helpful. All things are lawful, but not all things build up. And then in Matthew, Jesus talks about the heart. Don't you understand yet? Anything you eat passes through the stomach and then goes into the sewer, but the words you speak come from the heart. That's what defiles you. For from the heart come evil thoughts, murder, adultery, all sexual immorality, theft, lying, and slander. These are what defile you. I would say that it's concepts, right? It's your thinking that is what's defiling. Okay? So not everything from video games is going to be great. We are a broken, fallen world filled with broken people. Broken people who are artists. Broken artists make broken art. So we can't just blindly accept whatever it is that's coming from these broken artists. Yes, they could be incredibly talented. I don't know if any of you are watching Game of Thrones, for instance. It's an incredibly well-done show, ridiculous amounts of nudity and homosexuality and all kinds of stuff in the show. Very talented people making excellent art that still has the brokenness of the people that were making it. Okay? So one example is a game called Beyond Two Souls. Anybody play this game? It's an exclusive title, PlayStation 3. In the game, you play a character, Ellie, who has for lack of a better term, a spirit or a soul that is connected to her. So she is herself, and then there's this kind of other soul that's just kind of hanging around. And that soul can kind of do things, like you think of kind of like a ghost or something. You can kind of knock things over or do certain things and stuff. Okay, this is pretty heady stuff to be dealing with in a video game. And that's one reason I wanted to bring it up. But in this game, Ellie, who lives in a research lab because she's the only person that has these kind of so-called psychic powers, and she's under all this research and everything, so they bring her to a party with some other teenagers and to help her have like a normal sort of, high school experience or something like that, okay? So she's all excited, right? She's all excited to go to this party, and so she goes, and there's Ellie in the center there, and she's played by who? Anybody recognize her? Ellen Page. Yeah, Hollywood actors are making video games. They're being digitally scanned and are now performing in video games. Okay, it's not going to be long before the movies are using digital versions of actors. You can have your 30-year-old Harrison Ford, you can have your 40-year-old Harrison Ford, you have your 50-year-old Harrison Ford. And Harrison Ford will be around, and his estate will keep collecting money. This is the future of entertainment. So Ellen Page is Ellie in this scene. So what do you think the teens, how do they treat Ellie when she comes along? Not good. Because she's an outsider, and they're all cliquish, and they start making fun of her for very plain clothes and those kinds of things. Okay, and so there's this point in the game where Ellie she got locked in a closet for a while, and they were all kind of laughing at her and stuff. It's very much like the Carrie movie, if any of you have heard of that or seen that. So there's this moment in the game where you're about to leave, you're at the front door, and Ellie has to decide, is she going to go back and take revenge on all of them and destroy the house and hurt all these people, or let it go and walk forward? And you as the player have that choice. And the reason that I brought this up is because I have a friend who's part of an organization I won't tell you about, but a Christian who's involved in video games and writes about video games, and I would say a very thoughtful, discerning type person. And his Facebook post on this was, "You better bet your ass I'm taking revenge on these kids. They should never have treated Ellie that way." And that to me was very telling about this kind of, really? Really? Is it okay that you just went the revenge path within the video game? That's an open question. I'm not going to answer that for you. But this is an example of what I say, that kind of blind acceptance of what's going on. It's just like, yeah, how dare they do that to Ellie? Like, kill them all, kind of thing. Why? And so we need to be more thoughtful on that. Any comments on that?
It's a popular game.
Absolutely. This is a big game. It's not Grand Theft Auto 5 big, but yeah, it's a big blockbuster game that came out last year. And Sony was pushing really hard because of the transition from PlayStation 3 to PlayStation 4. This is one of the last big games for PlayStation 3. And phenomenally done. I really liked the game. It was a great game. Okay, so now the fourth response to video games is the opportunity. Okay, GameChurch.com. Yep, that's an actual thing. Jesus loves gamers. You know, in the end of Matthew, when he gives out the, what is it called? It's not the creational mandate.
Great Commission?
Yeah, the Great Commission. There we go. Thank you.
By Jesus.
Yeah, that's right. When he gives the Great Commission, he talks about bringing the gospel to all peoples, all tongues, like that kind of thing, right? In our day, that looks like all subcultures. Bring the gospel to all subcultures. And that could be furries, that could be goths, that can be video gamers. There's a lot of subcultures out there that need the gospel. Okay, so this is an opportunity. So how do you respond? What can you do as it relates to video games and ministry? Okay, the first thing is you can make them. You can make video games. It's actually never been easier. I don't think that's entirely maybe likely for all of you, but I do want to put that in your mind. Maybe you know someone who can program and is an artist and those kinds of things and stuff. And with your Bible college background, you can bring a level of understanding, a level of depth, a level of storytelling that maybe that person wouldn't have. And the two of you combined can go and create something and start changing the world. And the video game industry is open to indies. Okay, movies is not really so open to indie. We've had some few things like Napoleon Dynamite or whatever that have taken off. But in general, video games are far more open to indie efforts than the big blockbuster efforts. Okay, so Paradise Lost. Anybody read Paradise Lost by Milton? No, nobody's forced to read that. I read this, it changed my life. Totally love it. I'm not going to go on and on about it. What really opened my eyes was I know the story of Adam and Eve. I know it. I read it many, many times. I've heard people preach on it and all that kind of stuff. When I read Paradise Lost, 10,000 lines of poetry about the fall of mankind, it opened my eyes to what was really going on. It gave me a new appreciation for what was going on. And the thing that excited me the most was at the end of the poem, as Adam and Eve, who fell, and in the poem didn't know that they knew they fell. They knew they had misbehaved, but they didn't know they were going to get kicked out. And this was their home. And as they were escorted very gently by the angels out of their home, they were looking at flowers that they would walk by and say, I'll never see that again. They were looking at their favorite fruit. I'll never be able to taste that again. And so the exciting thing for me is Adam and Eve get to go back. They get to go back to the garden. When Christ comes again, we get to be there and see Adam and Eve go home. That is awesome. And I am excited about that. And nothing I read in Scripture, maybe unfortunately, got me as excited about the second coming as when I read Paradise Lost. And I got to know and see how the end of the story wraps up so beautifully. There's a game called That Dragon Cancer, written by a believer. Just a single guy. Well, he has 3 other people that are helping him. And it's about him being a dad with a child with terminal illness. And his son is currently 4 and still alive. And you play this out. You play the game of what it's like to be dad with a child with a terminal illness. This game got a lot of media attention, tons. as much as Beyond Two Souls with Ellen Page and everything. Okay? This game teaches at an emotional level. And we need stuff like this. And it's only because of a Christian that we have this. So that's, I think, important to think about your involvement in video games. For myself, I told you about working on this game kind of based on a book that involved wizards and all this kind of stuff. I do think about, what's it matter? What does God care about whether there's a video game about wizards and this kind of stuff? And I go back to the creational mandate. Go and fill the earth. It's not just with people. Fill it with art. Fill it with everything. And we can go forward in confidence in that. God wants us to be co-creators with him and make cool stuff. And your cool stuff is going to look different from my cool stuff. And maybe yours will be cooler than mine, but we're all called to be these co-creators of this earth. Next is you can use video games as a teaching tool, literally. And has anybody played The Sims 3?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So, for those who haven't played The Sims 3, they've sold a lot of units. If you combine all of the Sims expansions and all this stuff together, they've sold 125 million units. So it's big business. And basically, it's a virtual dollhouse. You have a person or a little family, and you give them jobs, give them little tasks to do, manage their relationships. They can have as much autonomy as you want to give them. But anyway, the idea here is that you have a job and you make some money and you can buy some stuff. And the stuff makes you happier and it makes life a little bit better. And then you can get a better job and then you can get better stuff. Okay? There is a philosophy in that. And it's the bourgeois philosophy. Okay? Anybody encountered this in your studies? Yeah. Okay? The unexamined life. No real interest in reflecting on the bigger question, just kind of keep plodding along and doing what everybody else is doing. Okay? So what's amazing about The Sims 3 is that it shows this philosophy in all of its glory within the game. You don't have to go outside of the game in order to kind of understand that. So at the start of the game, you have a very small house and not very much going on, and you kind of get this money and whatever, and then you get a bigger house with better stuff, and your bills go up. So you have to work harder and have a better job in order to have a bigger house with more stuff. And where does it end? Where does it end in The Sims? It doesn't. It never ends. And this is the treadmill that when you walk out these doors, most people are on, right? Now, how do you teach that to someone? By sitting them down and talking at them like I am to you? Probably not. But if they play the game and you have some reflection afterwards, it's like, wait a minute, my parents are bourgeois, right? And now you have a real teaching opportunity. So games, remember I talked about that experiential knowledge? You can have that experiential knowledge by utilizing game. This is just one example. The next thing is you could play them. You could play video games. This is a snapshot from World of Warcraft. And very quickly, because we wrap up, 2:30?
These guys would love you to wrap up at 2:30.
Why, what time are we done here?
Don't do that. Keep going here.
Be good.
Don't be fast.
Okay. Okay. Okay.
How much more content? You have like an hour and a half worth?
No. I got 6 more slides.
Oh.
Okay. Sorry. So World of Warcraft. So who here has played World of Warcraft? Wow. Okay.
Any of you guys?
Well, 2. We got 2. Jesus plays World of Warcraft. Played, yes. Same thing here. I played for... Yep. Well, I killed people. So anyway, I was playing World of Warcraft, okay? So I'm a believer, and I'm playing World of Warcraft. And I wasn't playing World of Warcraft for any noble reason other than to play World of Warcraft. I just loved it. Again, I love the art and all this stuff, so I'm playing along my World of Warcraft. And when you're playing this massively multiplayer games, you encounter other people. And some of them are dicks, and some of them are really nice. Can we say dicks? No, probably. Oh, sorry. Okay. Anyway, so some of them are really terrible, and some of them are really nice and stuff. And so you end up meeting these people. That's right. You're all woken up now. I did it on purpose. So anyway, so I'm going along in this one area, and there's this other guy, and I kind of start helping him a little bit just for fun, for no particular reason. I start talking with him, and he starts telling me that he has terminal cancer, and he can't do much, can't leave the house very much. And he plays World of Warcraft because it gives him kind of an escape from his house and from the illness that he's dealing with. And I was able to talk with him, and I was able to pray with him, just a little touch, it wasn't a big deal, it wasn't a huge conversion or something. But my point is, that wouldn't happen if I wasn't there, if I wasn't playing the game, right? And so playing these games, or games in general, they're like relationship glue. They will start gluing people together. They're designed that way. There's actually a reason for the companies that they want to glue all these gamers together. And you can utilize that. And so, this is just one example of something that happened to me while I was playing that. People want community, and they will find it anywhere they can. And if you talk to any of the people or see any kind of videos or whatever about gangs in the streets of LA or New York City or anywhere else, these people are like, I'll die for my other gang members, right? I will, because they love them, because they give them a sense of community and belonging, okay? People get that from these video games as well. The reason that a friend of mine keeps playing World of Warcraft, even though all the rest of us are done playing World of Warcraft, right? Did play World of Warcraft, was it's because of the community. It's because he's like, I know like 20 people on there. We were just talking about John, and his son plays League of Legends. Why? Because of the 4 other guys on the team of League of Legends. Like, that's what it's about. It's about that community. Like, these guys got my back and stuff. And so that opens up the possibility to have real conversation, and it does. And we'll go into more of that. So in my store, we created gaming rooms. And this is an example of one of the gaming rooms, and we put a mural on the back. And that's a mural that I got an artist to create on David and Goliath. It's told in a sci-fi way. Okay? It's David and Goliath. And then there's all these little Israelites in the background hiding. Right? And so this is a talking point in my store that you can come in, you can play, and I can talk to you about at least David and Goliath and how God was with David and totally overcame this huge giant robot. Welcoming gamers. Gamers need a place to play. Okay, now I'm talking about tabletop gaming and stuff. They need a place to play. It could also be an electronic. There's nothing more fun than a LAN party. Okay, where everybody gets all their stuff together. Okay, who has a house big enough for that? Not very many people. Do you guys work in a house, so to speak, that has a lot of room? Yes. The church has lots of rooms that are probably big enough to host LAN parties, right? You can open that up. So I want to give you an example of friends of mine. There's a group of 20 Dungeons & Dragons players, okay? There's about 20 of them in this group. And they were renting out the basement of a church. And they played there for, I don't know, like a year or something like that. And some little old lady in the church found out about people playing Dungeons & Dragons in the church basement. And she went and told the pastor, and the pastor was like, what? And he kicked them out. And he said, we don't want you here. Now, how do you tell those 20 people about a Jesus that wants them in his kingdom forever? And he built a home to house them. How do you tell them that? By welcoming gamers. You start with the little welcomes, and you tell them about the big welcome, right? Gamers are looking for that. So we'll wrap this up. Here's a resource for you that I've personally been involved with for the last kind of 6 months. Gospel and Gaming's website out of the US, St. Louis. And there's a guy who went to Presbyterian seminary, and he was just at the point of graduating, was planning to do what probably you're planning to do, like, hey, I think he was married by his 4th year, and he's like, I'm going to be a youth pastor. She's going to be a youth pastor's wife, and we're going to go, and we're going to do this thing, right, of ministry. And around in May, they graduate in June. In May, he says, God called him and said, I want you to be a missionary to gamers. He's like, what? Now, first of all, where do you find a mission organization that you can join to be a missionary to gamers? He hasn't found one. And so he's working through a certain mission organization. But yeah, this is like really new. And so his life took a complete 90-degree turn from everywhere he thought it was going to be. He is a chaplain to gamers. And one way that he does that is by running a League of Legends, what do you call them? Not team, but the kind of overarching group, or like a clan I don't really know what the term is in League of Legends world, but anyway, it's like a tribe or something. So they have about 80 people that all play League of Legends, split up into 5-man teams, and he organizes it. He organizes the whole thing and sets up practices and says who's allowed and who isn't, and deals with fights that happen between team members and all this stuff. Okay? And so what really amazed me when I was talking to this guy is the number of gospel presentations he's been able to make to the lost through running a gaming league. Okay? It's something like 40 gospel presentations in 6 months. You will not see numbers like that in any country, any missionary going off to another land and that kind of stuff. So I said, dude, I want to help you. And so there's two sides to this gospel and gaming. The first is what I just talked about organizing games and that kind of stuff. The second part is to be a resource for the church, to literally be a resource for you guys. So when you're out in the field and you're like, man, this new game came out and I don't know what it all means, to give some perspective, hopefully I've given you some perspective today, that's what this site's for. And so this is a screenshot of an article series I wrote about violence in video games. And it's a 7-part series, really getting into the details and nitty-gritty about why are games violent, what does that mean, and the psychological stuff behind that, and just really exploring that whole violence things. Because when you start talking about video games, the first question coming out of a parent or concerned church member is going to be around violence. And so that's why I have this article series. And there's going to be other stuff. I just told you about The Sims 3 and how you use that for teaching bourgeois. That's the kind of resource stuff that's going to be on this website. Okay? So that's gospel and gaming. Another example is this, from Game Church. This is the Gospel of John. Okay? Jesus for the win. And it's the Gospel of John. And there's it's written like a strategy guide. For anybody familiar with playing games, there's strategy guides and they have like call-out sections and stuff, right? And, I'll pass this around so you can see it. But anyway, just think it's funny. In the strategy guide, winning by dying. Winning by dying. And it talks about how Jesus won through death. So this is something they hand out at big gaming conferences. You can pass that around. People can have a giggle. There's people that go to the CGDC, which is one of the biggest gaming conferences it's in San Diego or San Francisco, I forget which. And they have a booth, and they hand out these things to gamers. And it says, everything you know about, everything you've ever heard about church and religion probably isn't true. Here's the strategy guide to Jesus. So that's just one way that you can reach out. And finally, that's right. In this world that has been created by Darwinism and people like Dawkins talking about being materialistic and naturalistic, and there is no such thing as a supernatural. In this world that we now have, our society, there isn't even good and evil anymore. There's just difference of opinion, right? The people trying to blow us up, it's just a difference of opinion. And so we've lost something. We've lost something. There's no longer a cause. There's no longer the opportunity to be a hero in real life anymore. And video games give you the chance to be a hero because there isn't something in society, right? I'm talking about the average gamer when they're living their life and whatever. There is no good and evil anymore. But at the moment I step into World of Warcraft, there's good, there's evil, and I can be a hero. And so my call to the people in the church is be a hero. Just don't let it all be within the video game. Be a hero in real life too. Because there is good and there is evil and there is supernatural forces and we can fight them. And so don't let your victories just be virtual ones. And that's all I have to say. Any questions? Yeah.
So much like I kind of want your opinion on how you would deal with this. Much like an alcoholic who is completely addicted to alcohol, you would not drink around him. You would say like, no, I'm enabling you.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, as great as video games might be and the opportunities there are a large population that are full-blown addicted. I mean, in some of these Asian countries, we're seeing like Gamers Anonymous. Like it's crazy, the intensity you kind of talked about. So how do you deal with kind of playing with or even enabling people in their addictions? Because although we might have good intentions and we might want to spread the gospel, there is a kind of responsibility we have not to enable them, because Call of Duty are children's gods. Like, Grand Theft Auto is people's gods. Unfortunately, it's not the way we want it, but that's the reality. So how do you kind of defend that, deal with that, thoughts? I don't know, I'm just kind of talking around here.
Okay. Well, I have no shortage of opinions,
Yeah.
if you haven't noticed already. Gaming addiction is a very difficult thing to nail down. But let's treat it as the word says. It's a gaming addiction. So it's hurting someone in their life. They're paying some kind of cost that they're not willing to pay, right? Like for instance, they talk about WoW widows, okay? Because in World of Warcraft, when it's raid time and you have 40 people getting together at 7 o'clock, on a Wednesday night, for the next 4 hours, do not talk to your husband at all, because he's raiding and it's really important. And if he leaves, they will die, and it ruins the whole experience for everybody and stuff, right? So they talk about WoW widows because they're playing like so intensely and everything, right? So the first kind of answer is you're talking about real addiction. You're talking about a real addiction, and so everything that we know about real addictions, whether it be chemical or relational, all come to play in that kind of thing. Okay, so what I'm saying is video game addiction is no different than a pornography addiction, than a chemical addiction, or those kinds of things. And so, at the same time, while somebody might have a pornographic addiction or even a sex addiction, right, to actual sex, right, that doesn't mean as a church we don't talk about sex, right? So I think there needs to be that sense of restraint, but not like, oh, well, because of one or several, we don't deal with it at all, which tends to be what I've seen in the church, how we react to things, right? It's like, we, at my church, we have kind of two men's groups for some reason. I'm in a really small church, but we have the official men's group that meets on the last Saturday of each month, okay? We get together. Is there beer there? No, there is no beer there. Why? Because it's an official church event. Those same people all get together at a pub on a Monday night, right after. It's all the same people. Nobody has a drinking problem. Why is there beer there and there's no beer at the other thing? One answer is because there could one day theoretically be someone who struggled with that, and we don't want that to happen there and stuff. That's a bit of a baby with the bathwater type issue. So I want to be sensitive. Like, for instance, with this guy that was bringing up the magic thing and stuff. One reason that I didn't tell you that he was so upset was because my church met in the same building that my store was in, okay? Not in my store, but they were just connected. And so when he would park his car, sometimes it would be right in front of a magic poster, right? And so here he was, and I also didn't tell you that he played magic as a teenager, and he found it to be a gateway to the occult. That didn't mean he started dabbling in the occult, but he felt this like, hey, this is kind of cool. I wonder what kind of magic there is in the real world, right? And so he saw this as a gateway to evil, and so that's why he wanted it gone. So I said to him, hey, I totally understand where you're at. You have reached this conviction where magic is totally wrong for you and your family and everything. I will take down the posters. I will always make sure there's a parking space for you away from the store. I will never talk about anything magic around you, and I will do everything and everything. That's what you see Paul writing when he talks about the eating meat, not eating meat and stuff. I will do anything for you. Why? Because when Jesus was about to die, he said to his disciples, love each other. This is how the world will know. Love each other, right? And it's like, dude, I want to love you. I will do whatever. I can't sell my store. I can't do that. But I can do all these other things for you so you know that I love you. Now, in that case, it wasn't enough for him. But I think that that's kind of the answer for if you have people that are dealing with video game addiction, if you have a WoW widow in your congregation, yes, have obviously some sensitivity to that and don't be kind of throwing these things around, but don't go too far. I've seen the church always go too far. And then we'd never talk about sex or video games or whatever. Does that kind of answer?
A little bit. I was just asking, like, where's the medium kind of thing? Because even with Christians and non-Christians alike, you're going to have people with just like, that just so, like, I know personally, I don't play video games not because I have a problem with it, but like when I start, like I can't stop. Like I'm just in the zone. Like I'm just like 8 hours of my day go by. So I know it's a personal thing, but I have the restraint to say no. I don't feel like doing that. As opposed to how do you play with people who you know don't have those restraints? You know what I mean? Like where's the medium?
I was at a conference in St. Louis for that organization I was just talking about, and the pastor that was kind of the MC and kind of leading things off had some kind of questions. He's like, have any of you played a video game, I think it was until midnight? And I was like, dude, you're asking the wrong question. You want to know who the real gamers are? The ones who played at dawn. Those are the real gamers. Okay, playing to midnight. Noob. So I myself, I know exactly what you're talking about. In game design terms, it's called flow. The holy grail of game design is to get people to the state of flow. And flow is when everything falls away and you're not thinking about anything else and it's just the game. Now, I think this is easier for men than it is for women. Because men are really easy to focus on just one thing, and women can focus on multiple things all at the same time. They're like built better or something, a higher CPU or something. But anyway, you get into this zone of flow, and yeah, time can just disappear. And you're like, whoa, wait a minute, where did that even go and stuff? You skip meals, and you skip bathroom breaks, and like all this stuff, right? Yeah, so that is what game designers are trying to achieve. And personally, when I'm working on a game, I'm trying to achieve that too. Okay, so now you're like, whoa, wait a minute, dude, you're part of the problem, right? You get those high pharaoh moments from the flow. So I'm trying to use the medium to give the best that the medium can give, okay? Now, that can make people addicted to that feeling, just like you can be addicted to sex or other things and stuff, right? So I know for myself, when my baby was born, I was like, I got to play less, right? I got to play less. And so I've had to kind of block time. And here's something that was kind of revealed to me. I was listening to the Lord and praying and just being quiet and still and listening to Him. And what He told me was, just as I set times aside to play, I need to set times aside to play with Claire. And I wasn't doing that. It was more like I had set things like my day job and certain tasks I'd have to do, church meetings. Those were always kind of booked. And playtime with Claire would happen around all that. But it was like, no, you got to be specific about that too, right? And so I had specific WoW times and specific playing with my daughter times. And so I have been able to balance that. Now, maybe someone else can't. Maybe that's you. And so you're just like, I can't do it, right? I just can't be a part of this and whatever. And that's totally fine. Because God's not going to call each one of us to be the gaming missionary guy, right? And maybe you would be someone better on the recovery side of things than someone who's at the CGDC handing out the tracks kind of thing, right? We're going to be called to fit different roles. I don't know if that answers your question better. Yeah? Okay. Because I can keep trying. Any other questions? Anybody else?
I'm just kind of curious with the website you mentioned there. Is there spots on there where you have like discussion questions to talk about people about various games? So like, say someone who doesn't know games well,
Yeah.
and they're going, I know people that I've connected with, they're into these games. How can I get a quick glimpse of what the game is, plus discussion topics of importance?
That is exactly what the site is for. Does it have it right now? No, not really. But over the next year, yes, that's exactly what it's for. And so it's what I find with Christian game sites is that they're made by Christians who love games, and they're just like, yeah, let's talk about games, and let's do game reviews, and we'll talk about how much sex or how much swearing there is in a game and whatever stuff. Like, I don't care about that. You know what I care a lot about is whether Ellie takes revenge or not. I think that's far more important for a player or as a teaching moment than whether there's a lot of swearing in Gears of War. Do you know what I mean? I'm not saying the swearing is not important. I actually really hate swearing a lot, and I never ever swear, and it really bothers me. But the revenge coming off as a good thing, that really bothers me, and that's the kind of stuff I want to be able to talk. So my goal is to be someone who's immersed in all this stuff and to use terms that you don't know, like MOBA and LOL and those kinds of things, not to laugh, League of Legends and WoW and this kind of stuff. For a guy like me to create stuff for someone like maybe you, so that you don't have to become a guy like me in order to be able to use this stuff, that it's something you can bridge, right? And so, there's feature films that are coming out. There's a Jesus film coming out right now, like next week or something, right? It was Son of God. Son of God's coming out next week. Do you know that? Do you know? Wow. Okay, so it's by Mark Burnett, the guy who created Survivor and did the Experience the Bible television series. It's like a huge Hollywood producer guy. Okay, anyway, so Son of God comes out next week. They have kind of these discussion questions and whatever, right? They're like at the forefront. They know, obviously, churches are going to be excited about a Jesus film. And so they've put together like, hey, here's some resources that you can use in your church. Here's questions and follow-up and how you can invite people in and talk and that kind of stuff. So just as they're doing that for feature films, we want to do that on gospel and gaming for you guys so that you have that, right? And, it's funny. I was talking with, I'm not the founder of it. I'm just a guy who helps. I write some stuff and do whatever. So I was talking to the founder guy about The Sims 3 and the bourgeois thing and whatever and stuff. He was like, oh, really? I didn't even know. So even amongst ourselves, to have the eyes to see kind of through the game, it's not the game anymore, but to see through what is the philosophy, what are the ideas that are coming out, what are the ideas you're playing out. Maybe that's a rare thing, and so we're trying to collect up people that can have that and create a resource for the rest of you. So I don't know, that sounds like a sales pitch or something, but anyway, that's the idea, to help you minister better to gamers. Other questions? So you don't ask when John's going to ask them.
I have a pile of questions, but that's okay. Don't you guys have any questions?
I asked one.
Does this stuff interest you at all?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, this to me is important for all of you. I think it's critical. That's why, Thomas, I had you here. When you said the feeling of accomplishment stuff, so that's like a key guy thing. It's like you're tapping into like a young guy, and it doesn't matter what age. That's like our thing, right?
Women have the Fiero moment too.
They do.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I've gamed before. It's
Well, I'm going beyond gaming. I'm just saying,
Yeah,
what ties a young guy though. That was new to me, right? That I got that stuff. Oh, so you want to be an accomplisher too? Okay.
No, because I work at Tim Hortons, and so there's a window between 6 and 10 where we have to get 25 seconds or less at the window. And I love it because it's competition. I want to beat my last hour, and at the end, if we do better than the day before, then it's just such a good feeling, and that's what that is. It's that feeling of accomplishment.
The Fiero is the same in men and women. It's what creates it that differs. So I use a really sexist example. It's brutal. Don't even listen to me. So I'm playing The Sims, and my character maybe gets a job promotion. I'm like, yeah, because I've been working towards that, and I've been manipulating my friends and whatever in order to get the job promotion. I'm like, yes, right? And maybe for a woman playing The Sims, it's about getting that relationship to a certain level. They have ways of measuring the relationships and stuff in the game and stuff, right? That's the same as maybe the job promotion. So the Fiero is going to come from a different thing, but it's still the same. And so what's happened in gaming is that they have changed some of the game design to offer more female Fiero moments. Customization and decoration are hugely important to women. Okay, you take your typical guy, dorm room, and your typical girl dorm room. They look very different. Okay, the guys basically,
They smell different too.
Yeah, they smell different. The guys' room will not be sort of decorated as much. There won't be as much personalization to the room as a woman. I'm not talking about having big posters or not posters or something, but the level of care that goes into customizing the space is higher in general for women.
No, I find that funny because my son and I were talking about he got a Tiger Woods golf a few years ago, and he played with his sister, but all she cared about was what he looked like whatever the character looked like, the pants, the thing, the whole thing. You know, so this massive score, but the thing looks good. Let me ask you something else. But when you were talking about condemnation, that whole 4 areas, condemnation, what the church does, it kind of reminded me of skateboarding in the day. It was like my thing was like skateboarding, and well, not my thing, but the church hated skateboarders. They put signs up around our church, no skateboarding. I don't know if you know that. That was at our church at Park.
Yeah,
I ripped them down. Like I personally went out and pried them up and pulled them aside. I'm like, we don't put no to anything to do with kids, right?
Right.
That being said, skateboarding was like this negative. Everybody thought like they were negative about it before they learned about it.
Yeah.
Sounds similar to what we're talking about here. Let's throw skateboarding out the door for a second because it would just remind me of that. When I do think of the church, there's fear, right? So people don't like something, don't understand it, they tend to go at it in a fearful way. Are there games though that are bad? Like are there some that you would suggest though that for this group we should stay away from?
Yeah, so I'm going to answer that in a really diplomatic way because for me to answer and say, yes, you should never play Grand Theft Auto 5 is for me to be doing the same thing that the guy did about Magic.
Okay.
You see? So I'm...
is Grand Theft Auto 5 something that we should be promoting? What? You better be diplomatic about that.
As he said, when we talk about the appropriate audience and the time and place in which maybe you can promote. Like I'm really trying to think through all the scenarios. My gut reaction is, under no circumstances would you ever, promote Grand Theft Auto 5. You need to understand, particularly for that title, Grand Theft Auto 5. Again, I told you, is the most expensive video game. What that means is that they put more effort into that than any video game before. I'm a video game designer. I need to know what the heck did they do in that game that I can learn or utilize or whatever and stuff. But here's the problem. I have to go through all this crud in order to do that. And I have never been in a strip club, ever. In that video game, you can go to strip clubs, and they're totally nude, and they're dancing all around and whatever. And I think that's really going down the wrong path for me, right? To virtually go to a strip club, that might get me going to one in real life. I don't ever want to go to one in real life. So to me, Grand Theft Auto 5 is a very dangerous game for many reasons. That I'm just picking out one. I can't play Grand Theft Auto 5. And that really sucks. But Jesus is my Lord. He's in charge of what's right and wrong for me, not me anymore. Okay, that's what happened at 16 when I said, okay, you're in charge. So for me, Christianity looks like me not playing Grand Theft Auto 5. I can look at videos on YouTube and get an idea about it and all this other kind of stuff. I'm not going to tell anybody in this room you should never play Grand Theft Auto 5. But I can definitely say Minecraft is a lot safer for promotion and all these other things.
That's going to be the flip side of it. I was asking that tongue in cheek, by the way. So the other part of it is, okay, then what are some of the best gaming options for teaching? For like what would they be? Because then...
Yeah. Has anybody played BioShock Infinite? BioShock Infinite. Yep, a couple guys in the back. That game, for example, so first I'll start with, the reason we need like a gospel and gaming website is because to answer questions like that, because for myself, I don't have like a long list of stuff. I have like The Sims 3 and maybe Minecraft and kind of thing, right? So we need some kind of collective, almost like crowdsourced way of like, what are these teaching opportunities like games and stuff, okay? But BioShock Infinite is an incredible game with an incredible story and great artistic design and all this stuff, okay? There's a moment in the game where, I should back up. I just got baptized recently, like in the last 3 years. Because I was baptized as an infant, and I really struggled with whether I should be baptized as an adult. And we're all in a Baptist college here, and so the answer is yes, you have to be baptized as an adult. But anyway, I had to struggle through all that, and so about 3 years ago, while I was an elder, I got baptized, and I thought that was weird and whatever. Anyway, so I got baptized. I got baptized Jesus style in a river, because if it's not in a river, it's not exactly how Jesus did it. Anyway, so I got baptized in a river. Okay, so that was a big moment for me and obviously my life, and that was about 3 years ago. And I played BioShock Infinite, and there's at the very beginning of the game, you're just kind of getting your feet wet, so to speak, and you're kind of walking around. There's kind of a cathedral, and you're about to go into the city, and the city is created by one guy, and before you can go into the city, you have to be baptized. This is a game, a AAA title, blockbuster title, where you have to be baptized to enter into the city. And that baptism moment, the voice acting or something, it just brought it all back for me. It was just this amazing moment, and I felt amazing. I had this like spiritual moment playing BioShock Infinite. And then there's a part later on in the ending where there's another baptism that takes place, and I felt like it was like real. Like they say, do you renounce the devil and accept Christ and everything? And he's like, yes. He has this desperation in his voice. Yes, I do. I want to be clean. And there is no game, I've never played a game like it, that so nailed the gospel message in that moment. And that was an amazing thing. And so I think that you could use BioShock Infinite in order to teach and do something. But off the cuff, I don't have like a list of, here's 14 questions you could ask or something like that. So that's just one example.
But you were saying Sims 3 is a teaching tool if you use it properly.
Yes, for sure.
Right? Or a discussion thing. You guys have any questions on any of this stuff? So, Dylan, you play. Do you guys play, how many of you play like more than 4 hours a week? Okay, listen, nobody's going to know. Your mother's not going to know.
No, not during school, but like summer reading.
Okay, so you guys are you play, right? Okay, so this is my biggie. If these guys play, how can we as the church allow them to play on behalf of youth ministry so they can hang out with our kids? Like, would you guys want to do that? So now you're, like, you might see kids on your youth group night, but you go home, they're already on the computer playing, right? So how do we do that? Is that being done? Is there a model out there? Is the church afraid of it? If I was doing youth ministry game, I would actually ask volunteers. I want 4 of you guys to be playing video games with these guys.
Yeah.
And if your church is going to give you heat, I'll take the heat for you because it's important. Like, I believe it's that important.
Yeah. It's what I was talking about, like with the WOW with the cancer guy, right? Like, you got to be there. And so you can, once a week at your youth group, be talking and playing around with the kids and whatever and stuff and interacting with them, or you could be doing it every night on a Minecraft server or a League of Legends team or something like that. And not just them, but for their unchurched friends, right? So going back to this gospel and gaming guy, again, this like really weird guy that's just all of a sudden like a missionary to gamers, he runs his organization and he has people in play and they're like, what are you? like why would somebody from the church want to run a League of Legends like organization and stuff? And he's like, yeah, well, just want to let you know we love you guys and we're here and whatever and stuff. And the kinds of conversations that come out of that. And these are people that he has never met in real life, RL. These are people that he has met only through TeamSpeak and only in the game. And I can give you 2 examples. One is for kind of breaking down boundaries. There's a guy, U.S. military. He's in China, he's stationed in China, and he's a homosexual. And he says, oh, so you're a gaming pastor. Well, I'm a homosexual. What do you think of that? And he's like, everybody, God loves all people, and I don't agree with that, but I can still play with you. And he's like, you were the first Christian I have ever met that hasn't condemned me. Right? How was that possible? Because he was online playing. That's it. That's the only thing. There's no special magic to this. Just be online and play. Right? And then these conversations come up. So second one is a guy that plays, and they play on Wednesday nights, and he plays pretty frequently. And his girlfriend moved to Florida from, I don't know, they're in the Midwest or something. So he moved to Florida. And he was like, I think I want to marry her. And I think that I'm going to get a ring, and I'm going to drive out to Florida, and I'm going to propose. And he goes to this gaming chaplain guy, what do you think? What do you think I should do? And all they do is game together. Is this not the holy grail of youth ministry? Do you not want to be that guy or that girl? Like that, you get called on, like, I'm about to make a major life decision, and because I trust you in gaming, I'm going to ask you for your opinion on my life. And that's what this guy experiences. You know what his call is? He's like, if you're a Christian and you play, come help me, please. We need more of you on the teams, right? I can't do it all myself. He has 80 people that he's ministering to right now. He's like, what happens when we have 200? What happens when we have 2,000? I can't do it all. So not everybody has to join him in gospel and gaming and stuff. You can do your own thing. Another huge challenge point, because I've brought this stuff that I'm talking to you about, I brought this to my elders team and said, if we're paying X amount of dollars per month for missionaries that are off in Papua New Guinea, why are we not paying anything for ministering to North Americans through gaming and stuff? And the thing that our church, they didn't do a bad job of it, but the challenge for the church is they're so myopic and just focused on their own little territory, right? And so I could say, yeah, this organization is super effective, and we have all these gospel presentations, and we have any metric you can come up with, and we're awesome on this metric. And they're like, yeah, but where are the people? Well, there's one in Ohio, and there's one in New Brunswick, and there's one in Montreal, and whatever. Those aren't our people. What? What? Now, I'm not saying that's what they said, but that's the general idea, right? It's like, oh, Tapestry is a little church in Burlington, and we really want to minister to the people within a 4-block radius of where we meet. And I'm like, dude, that world has ended. There's a new world where my best friend can be in Florida, another one in China, another one in South Korea, and we can all have this great, friendship and camaraderie and this stuff. The church is going virtual, and we need to minister virtual as well. So a little tiny church in Burlington of only 20 people could come up with $100 a month in order to pay towards getting the gospel message out to whomever. Who? Someone that'll listen, really. That's the bottom line, right? And so there are people gaming, looking for community that have life challenges that we can reach. I don't care if they live in Burlington or not. I don't care. I know that's a challenge for consistory boards. I know that's a challenge. That's something you're going to be faced with, right? If you say, hey, we saved someone in Burlington and we saved someone in South America, they would say, what a great bonus that we got that guy in South America. But if you only saved someone in South America, they'd be like, yeah, I'm not sure how good this program is or something. So that's what I see as the biggest barrier.
Mm-hmm. Anybody, y'all done? You guys?
Yeah.
Random question, but is there any follow-up in case someone does get saved online?
Yeah.
Are there procedures in place?
Yeah, so again, this is all new, right? Can you tell? This is all new. So somebody, gets saved. Great. Who do we plug them into? Better be a church that's okay with gaming, right? Because if he's in Ohio, I don't know places in Ohio. So part of Gospel and Gaming is trying to recruit churches that we can send people to. How awesome is that? Think about that from being on the consistory board or elders board or whatever and stuff. And it's like, oh yeah, there's this group, Gospel and Gaming. They want to send us 3 new believers. We should vote and decide whether we want new believers to come or not, right? That's like the holy grail of church, right? And that's literally what this organization, I don't want to talk too much about it because Game Church, the thing that they're doing the same thing, right? God hedges his bets, I guess. Lots of different people kind of doing the same kind of mission and stuff, right? We see that within the church. There's a lot of different, ways of doing church. And so, anyways, lots of people doing that. And so, in the case of Game Church, there is no follow-up. In the case of Gospel and Gaming, there is definitely a follow-up type thing. And wanting to partner with churches. And so, we can do, from a gaming perspective, the fishing, and then lead people into a community that's going to help love them. Does that answer your question?